All right. So when do we interrupt programming? This is kind of important because this goes back to we would love to know from you all what is actually happening. That helps us out a lot. Tornado warnings obviously is a given. Destructive severe thunderstorm warnings, those high-end ones now, either whether it's 80 mile per hour wind gusts or baseball-sized hail, those warnings that trigger the WIA alerts will usually go on for that. I mean, that was a big change, especially that happened after the 2020 derecho. Anything that's going to trigger phone alerts usually will also be on the air. It kind of depends on some other factors. It depends on what reports we've received. If there's a warning out and we just are not getting any information, any ground truth of any kind, it makes it a lot harder for us to justify to our bosses and to everyone else who is, on our cases in that moment that we still need to be on air. It depends on what programming is on too, right? Our thresholds will change a little bit, whether we like to say it or not, depending on what we're about to interrupt, all right? This past fall, we at KCCI, because we're a CBS affiliate, we're carrying Iowa, the Penn State game, which didn't end up going that well. So they probably would have liked it if we had interrupted the second half. But there's a nice slight risk of severe weather that day. And I was stressed going into this because I did not want to have to go on during this game at all. Obviously, I would have if I had to. But, the station was super excited about all the money they were making from the advertising that they had sold. They had been, selling this big time all of the way through. There was probably over 100,000 people watching at that point. So we are thinking a little bit about what is on the air. What will we go on wall to wall instantly? Will we wait for a commercial break? That sort of a thing. So the more information you can give us about what is happening exactly, that really helps us too. And it kind of depends exactly where things are happening as well. Obviously, it doesn't matter where you are, whether you are Polk County, Story County, or if you are way up north in Kasuth County is technically part of, at least here in Des Moines, our viewing area. I know we have folks from Cedar Rapids and Waterloo as well. They're obviously a little bit farther off to the east. But, for example, if we have, let's say, a severe thunderstorm that's tornado warned, and it's coming into our viewing area, it's technically still outside, but it's coming in from the west, we might go on early. If it's leaving our viewing area, then we might be a little bit less aggressive. So, we are kind of making those decisions sometimes. But we actually have a lot of people all the time who don't really understand how big a TV station's coverage area is. In central Iowa, it goes border to border. It goes from Minnesota down to Missouri. There are some people, our viewers, who think it's basically just the 9 counties in the core, right, surrounding the Des Moines metro. Obviously, it's not. There are some people who send us messages asking why we're not on the air for something in Burlington or Spencer. Well, obviously, we don't cover that either. That's up to our partners who work at other TV stations in other markets.
And it's also all or nothing. We're either on for everyone or no one. So we're kind of weighing those decisions. I remember last year, the March 31st event, I think we made the decision we were going to stay on for maybe some of those outside counties because it was just such an extraordinary event. So we'll make those decisions in the moment. So let's kind of talk about, too, when we are in the moment, in the middle of severe weather coverage, some of the things we're doing, we're balancing. And again, sometimes it's one meteorologist trying to do all of these things, especially if it's, say, late at night and maybe it's a little bit of a sneaky severe weather event. So we're often both talking on air and then also trying to do radar analysis. We're trying to read reports. We're trying to look at viewer photos. We're trying to get those photos on the air. A lot of multitasking. And sometimes only one person is doing all of these things. If there are more people, then of course, we could kind of share the load a little bit, but that's one huge challenge as we are constantly multitasking. So the more you can give us, again, we're going to say this so many times probably, the better, the more helpful it is because, again, we're kind of working with a limited amount of information, a limited amount of people. And so the more help we can get, the more information, the better and the easier as well. So we're analyzing radar, we're looking at photos, looking at reports too. And then in a maybe more serious severe weather event, there's kind of this handoff that takes place as well. So emergency managers, you may be dealing more with reporters, whereas the meteorologists, we are usually involved as the event is happening. So we're relaying reports in the moment. We're giving radar analysis in the moment. And then we kind of make that handoff to the newsroom kind of after the event. And many times I know I've had reporters or our bosses may be coming up to us and asking, hey, where should we send someone? Again, we're relying on reports to know where to send people. And it all goes back to, as we were just talking about, when we can show people something, the more likely they are to take action and hopefully to get out of your hair too. Because if they're seeing it on TV, they won't be as inclined to go looking for it.
Right. Yeah. And after a severe weather event, if there is damage or injuries or something in your guys' local jurisdictions, our reporters a lot of times are going to come wherever that is. They're not there to make your lives more difficult, I swear. They are just trying to pass along information to our broader audiences, because there are people who are asking us about, we get tons and tons of phone calls into our newsrooms. We're just trying to tell them what you know, right? Basically, we're not there to ask you what you did or did not wrong or that sort of a thing. We're just there to pass along what you want to know about who's been hurt, where we want you people not to be, that sort of information. So if our reporters are, asking for your phone number, that's just so they can contact you when they need to. They're not trying to creep on you or something like that. We love if you have centralized places to provide information to us as well. Because like Gabe mentioned, a lot of times we're doing 5 things at once, like you guys are. If you have Facebook pages for your emergency management, or it's strictly like through just your county, whatever it is, if you can update that, that's awesome. If you're busy, that's okay. We get it too. We're probably going to call you, and that's why, because we don't know exactly what's going on, and we just want to know what we need to know so that we can tell everybody else who's asking and clamoring for that sort of information. So we're here to help you reach the people who need to be reached, not to, for our own fun.
And feel free to view us meteorologists too at each station as maybe an inside resource for you as well that you have access to through chat, and almost view us as maybe your point person that we can then kind of shuffle the newsroom to, or funnel the newsroom to, because then they often are leaning on us to kind of give them that help when these events are going on.
And the reason being is because, like you all, we don't have as many people as a lot of people think we do too, right? This is a picture of our newsroom during a weekday at 4:30, which is when it's usually at the busiest. You can't see everyone in the picture because it's pretty small, but there are 18 people in there. At a different time of day, there might be a tiny, less than a handful of people there. And if there's a severe weather event that has happened and maybe we weren't fully staffed ahead of time, they're doing their best to try to get information from wherever they can and pass it along. And that's why sometimes, things might happen, mistakes might get made, that sort of a deal. It's just because we're not always, we don't have an army of people like some people think we do, just like you folks don't as well. And obviously, things are changing for us, just like they are for you all in the weather service and emergency management. Media is obviously changing all the time. We have to do more and more newscasts, which takes away our time to quality control things we're going to do, to forecast, look at in-depth pieces of data about the environment that severe weather is going to happen in. I took a couple screen grabs. We both have 9 o'clock newscasts. That didn't used to happen more than a decade ago. You guys have a 4 o'clock newscast at 13, right? That cuts into your prep time every day. A lot of our work has shifted online. They want us to produce stuff for our digital operations, whether that's social media, whether that's websites, apps, and so on. And all of that takes up the time that we would normally be trying to predict the weather and, put together good stuff. And obviously in media, there's turnover as well, especially since the pandemic. It's one of those professions that all of a sudden there's fewer people who are staying in one place at one time. And sometimes that leads to some small errors. To illustrate this point, I took a screen grab of one of our newscasts not too long ago where we put just a short reader story from one of our newer producers who wrote it about the Iowa Beef Expo coming up in February. And then there's that picture next to it. Do you think we got emails?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we got tons of emails just because it's obviously the wrong cow. It's a Holstein cow, which is obviously not usually used in beef operations. Small little stuff like that is what's taking up our brains sometimes, because we are trying to avoid not only our own mistakes, but to help other people out as well. That's just sort of all the random little stuff that's going on sometimes in what we do. So that's kind of our Cliff Notes version. Anything you want to add before we ask questions?
No, I think you covered it.
Any questions? You can't ask something that's not as crazy as some other things that people have said. Remember when I showed you the map of our coverage market? We had somebody email in a few weeks ago who told us that we needed to change it because it looked like someone giving someone the middle finger. Like that, like, oh, yep, we'll get right on that. Just cut the people in Algona off. Anyway, so if you have any questions.
Can't unsee that every single.
Otherwise, you can talk to us later, obviously. We'll be here the whole day. Because everyone wants to go to lunch. Yes, Chad.
So we talked about staffing and managing staffing. So how does that work before an event? Do you, I mean, at nighttime, you guys staff up the newsroom and the Met department? What would be the, during a big event at 9 o'clock at night, how many people would you have?
If we have prepared in advance, and it's easier now because obviously like our forecasts are getting better, right? It doesn't happen as often where we're caught off guard. As you know.
Although I still feel like we just said the other day, the days where we're fully prepared is when nothing happens,
We have a
and then the
buff,
reverse
yeah.
is true.
Yeah, but so let's say it's a well forecast event of some kind. We will probably have multiple meteorologists in, at least two, I would say.
Yeah.
My colleagues, yes. Yeah, two, sometimes three. And the news department will also have more people in as well, just because they want to be ready to go wherever they need to go. If it's during like a weekday, a lot of times we won't have to have extra people because we already will be fully staffed for that sort of thing. It's usually more on like weekends and off times that we will have to preemptively bring people in. But obviously the bosses are always wanting to be a little bit judicious about that. Well, it depends on where you're at, obviously, different stations, different companies, but the bosses don't want to just do that all the time because you're going to pay people extra, especially our hourly employees, if you have them come in ahead of time.
Yeah.
Who, when you decide you're going out on the, with the storm chasers, is the short straw the studio or is the short straw the person going out? Which one's the?
He's asking how do we decide who gets to go out and chase and who gets to stay in studio? I mean, it depends on the personal preference. Like Trey likes to chase a lot, right? Yeah. So, some people like to do it a lot. Some people would rather be in studio. It depends on the personal preference. Sometimes like I've been out chasing and I didn't really get to see anything. So I kind of felt like I got the short stick there because basically I went out and I just got rained on and watched a lot of, in chasing terms, I saw some great structure, some great clouds that didn't produce anything.
And we just send Roger Riley into the tornado. So, because he wants to go.
That's also the other side of ours is because we're telling people, go inside, stay out of the weather, and then, no offense, this is gonna come off really bad, but you guys are out there driving in it and we're like, what the?
Yeah, we get that a lot. And the justification basically is kind of what I mentioned earlier, where people will not believe you about the severity of a situation unless they see it. We get this especially during winter weather, right? We're telling people not to be out on the roads and then we're out driving, showing them the roads. But the idea is basically if we're one car out there that can transmit a signal that goes to tens of thousands of people and a few people see that and say, oh, you know what, maybe I don't need to go into town today. That's kind of the idea. If we go out, then maybe you're less likely to go out and that cuts down on the number of people who are not sheltering or are out driving in a blizzard.
Yeah, we're here so you don't have to be. And then, I mean, in the case of meteorologists, we're out and when it's severe weather, we know where we should and shouldn't be most of the time. We all get caught off guard sometimes.
What is related to communication with emergency management? What would you say is your pet peeve and how can we fix it?
I don't think I have any pet peeves per se. As in, I
And
don't, I've
the
never had
weather
any-
service, you guys probably get this. I think when people will say the forecast was wrong, when really maybe they didn't fully understand what the forecast was. And so that's our job, is to communicate the uncertainty, right? What can go wrong in the forecast. And And then, yeah, we try to stress impacts. I don't know if I mentioned that. Impacts and timing are the two big things we're trying to get out there. So anything that anyone can do to amplify those two messages, super helpful.
Just whenever you can, please tell us what's happened or what is happening. You know, I got a viewer picture on Facebook once of baseball size hails. I think it was down in Clark County by Osceola. And I saw it a month later, just because the way Facebook algorithms and notifications work. So like that would have been helpful, but not 30 days afterwards.
Or I guess we were talking about too, our worst nightmare is to get a tornado warning in a fringe county where the radar is hard to read and then we get no information and we're on the air for half an hour, essentially repeating ourselves the whole time. You know, so again, anything you can get is helpful.
And I was just going to add, like, feeling if there's a sense of information's being withheld, because we are actually getting slammed hearing from people like, what's going on? What's going on? Why aren't you telling us what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? We're like, well, we need to get the information from the correct sources. And when we don't get the correct information, we're having to say, well, we're not being told what's going on. And on top of that, we'll get wrong information, like just people out in the community will tell us something that's not correct, but we're not getting any verification from people who are managing the situation. So we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Something's going to fill the vacuum if there's a vacuum, right? Yeah.
That was kind of my question too, is what can we do as emergency managers? I went to the weather test bed down in Oklahoma, it's Norman, and I got great information on that of what should we share with you, but from your vantage point and being here, what information would you like to receive from us? And a lot of times we might not be able to call you because we are getting slammed, but what information would you like to see from us that we can provide to you? Granted, it might
For
not be
one,
timely.
it's raining, there's lightning, we don't really care, you know, but if it's severe weather related, anything, any report is helpful.
If you
Is
have
that too vague?
hail that fulfills what a severe thunderstorm warning is, like, you know, inch in diameter or bigger, if you have damage or tree damage or wind damage, I guess I should say, that would fulfill severe levels, right? That sort of stuff. I mean, big tree limbs taken down, trees blown over, trees snapped, etc. Something like
A lot of
that.
that we'll put, I know a lot of us will work in Slack and things like that, so be getting it real time. So we might not have time to call you, but we'll be.
Oh, yeah.
Slack is great.
If you put it in there, yes.
Getting that into Slack in real time.
That's honestly preferred.
That's kind of how I learned too, is feed it into the old platform NWS chat. You'll be getting that in real time as well.
Yeah.
Yes. The Slack version of NWS chat is king, basically.
Also, if there's like an area people should stay away from,
Mhm.
like if you don't want people coming into like a certain cross section of roads, if you can put that information in Slack, then, you know, we can say you need to stay away from this specific area. Please don't go in, you know, that sort of thing too, because that would be really helpful to share.
If it works.
So one of the things that to answer your question, one of the things that I do is on Twitter or X or what the hell it's called now. I'll put the information like, hey, there's like a ice storm or something. There's like hail, and then that automatically I notice that then the weather picks it up, and then it's like, hey, in Madison County. So it makes it a lot easier. But I was going to also say, relationship building is key, right? So I don't know if you guys have ever gone to the weather, like down to the news stations, but it helps because I know for me, building a relationship prior to works out better because then like we can have a quick conversation. It's not like awkward the first time we're talking. And yeah, it works out a lot better. So I guess for you guys, like ultimately, would you like to see a better relationship? Like, will that work to have more like that interaction between us and you guys when it comes to that kind of stuff?
Yeah. More of any kind of interaction is great. We give station tours. There's some days where I'm not working on air. I can give somebody a tour.
And we like to talk, so.
We don't shut up.
So if we actually just put our reports on
Slack.
the Des Moines,
Mhm.
main room.
Yep. Then we can see that. That is what we will have open during severe weather.
What's amazing about Slack now is that it has a fun app on your phone that
Yeah.
so much easier than the old NWS chat. So like if you guys aren't at your computer and you're out at a scene on something, I mean, I have a few emergency managers numbers, but sometimes I do text them because I'm like, I'm hearing about this. Do you have any information? But when we're on the air, you don't have to give us a phone call. We want you to just put it in there. And if it's as simple as, I mean, you're basically sending a text at that point into the chat room. That's the best way to get that information. Yeah.
So do you guys ever ask follow-up questions in Slack? Because that's one, so back in the day when we had just regular chat, and I'm notorious, like I only use the EMA chat on both Slack and on the old chat. Because it used to be anything you put in chat, then you get 6 phone calls from 6 different weather services or media outlets trying to get answers to things, and it was very frustrating. So that's why I just kind of stuck with EM only. That way I could share information. And then if it was, I mean, we're really good about putting stuff on Facebook and putting it out there. And I'm all about the media knowing and getting things because people will make it up if you don't. But it does get frustrating when you put something in there and then your phone's blowing up for the next hour from different media outlets trying to get more information. And it's
Do
funny
you
if they show
prefer that?
up.
You'd rather just answer it right there?
I would, yeah.
You'd rather us reach out to you, basically respond to you via Slack then?
Just like they showed earlier, reply to that
That's a good
specific
idea.
thread and.
I think what you're speaking of is when we pass a location on to our newsroom and then the reporters
Correct,
start bugging you.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
because the reporters and the want, yeah, they want. So.
But they're also working on deadlines to where, you know, if they don't have them in the head, yeah.
I don't
Right.
know what the solution to that is because from the news side of it, our news director will want us to go out there and get a visual. And so they want to find out exactly, well, where can I go to get a visual? I don't know, it's like a double-edged sword,
That
like,
is usually the first question. Where can we go to get the best
and
picture?
and that's what they're asking us.
So.
It's tough, the divide between getting the info out, but
What's the address?
Yeah.
We can search.
This is why I don't work in news and I work in web. So I could just talk about what